welcome to Gender Heretics. I'm Nix, and it's only me this time around because, largely because there is some drama going down on Twitter, which I didn't really want to wait until someone else was available to come on with me. So this is mostly a Nix rant today. So I want to talk about what I'm calling Jameela Gate in my head. So Jameela Jamil, who is an actress, she is best known for her role on The Good Place, playing the character Tahani Al-Jamil. I'm actually quite a big fan of the show and of her character as well. She's had some really good stuff to say about body image and sexism and race, but she's also quite a passionate LGBTQ ally, in her words. And she has been quite vocal about this stuff on Twitter in the past. She has called out other celebrities for perceived transphobia, and she has been involved in some dogpiling of certain people on Twitter as well. But she's recently come under fire herself because of her role as a judge on the new HBO voguing competition show, Legendary. So voguing competition is a part of what's known as ball culture. And just for a quick overview of what that is, it's a sort of underground LGBT subculture. According to Wikipedia, originated in 1920s New York City, in which people compete for trophies, prizes, and glory at events known as balls. And the participants are mainly young African American and Latin American LGBTQ people. So this is something that is cultural, it is something that is historical. And as I said, Jameela Jamil is going to be one of the judges. So she's been promoting this on her Twitter account for a little while, and she's copped a bit of criticism. Not a lot, proportionally speaking. I can think of many other people who have copped a lot worse. The backlash doesn't seem that brutal from my perspective, but evidently it has been a bit much for her. She's obviously been going through a rough time with it. So the criticism is generally about the appropriateness of her playing a role of judge on this show. And the reasons for this being that she has been understood generally to be a cis-het woman, and also that she doesn't have any connection to ball culture at all to speak of. And the critics have been suggesting that there are more appropriate people to fill the role that she is going to be filling. The criticism honestly has been pretty measured. From what I've looked at, it's not really verbal abuse or anything like that. It's people mostly saying, that they don't think that she's suited to this role. They don't think it's appropriate for her to be filling this role, and explaining the reason why. That's not actually what I want to talk about today. I don't have a stake in this, and I don't know much about ball culture, and it's also not the kind of show I'm probably going to watch. I don't watch a lot of TV. And I would leave it to the people who do have some connection to the culture to comment on that side of it. What I want to comment on is how Jameela Jamil has responded to the criticism. So she has responded by coming out as, quote, queer. So she tweeted a statement on February 5th with the heading, "Twitter is brutal." I'm not going to read the entire thing out. You can find it on her Twitter account. But she, in a nutshell, she says that she, this is why she never came out as queer before, that she hasn't exactly hidden it. If she's ever been asked about it on Twitter, she's answered honestly. She's added a rainbow to her name when she felt ready a few years ago. She talks about keeping it low because of being scared of the pain of being accused of performative bandwagon jumping. and talks about how it's frightening as an actor to admit your sexuality, especially when you're already a brown female in your 30s, and that this is not how she wanted to come out. She says that she's going to be jumping off of Twitter for a little while because she doesn't want to read mean comments dismissing this. She points out that she knows that her being queer doesn't qualify her as ballroom, but points out that she has privilege and power and a large following to bring to the show. And that sometimes it takes those with more power to help a show get off the ground so we can elevate marginalised stars that deserve the limelight and give them a chance. She points out that she's not the MC or the main host, she's just a judge, and attributes this to her experience of hosting, the fact that she's fully impartial, and that she's a newcomer to ballroom, like much of the audience is going to be. She also describes herself, interestingly, as a long-time ally of the LGBTQ community, which is a bit odd considering that she's coming out as being a member of it in the same statement. But anyway, she talks about the people that she's going to be working with, and then she says that it is fucking hard to be asked to continue to be patient after so long of waiting for what you want. She says that South Asian stories are almost never told without white stars, which is true. And she says that she hopes that people don't let a few castings designed to help the show get off the ground stop them from supporting the talent from ballroom on the show. And she also sends a message to the press saying that she really, really doesn't want to talk about it, and let's just focus on the contestants of the show until it's out. Best, Jay. So I just want to break down some of this statement a little bit because there's quite a lot about this that doesn't sit right with me, and the more I think about it, the more irritated I get. And at this point, I actually feel a little bit insulted as well. My first issue with this is obviously the context in which this coming out occurred, coupled with some of the things said in this statement. She talks about how she never officially came out as queer, which I don't know how you officially come out as queer, because queer is a very, very vague word that could refer to a number of different things. So to me, it's not something that you can come out as because it doesn't provide any actual information. And when she talks about how she kept it low because she was scared of being accused of performative bandwagon jumping, I mean, I can't think of a circumstance in which that is more likely to happen than when you are being criticized for accepting a position that people feel that you're not suited to, and then you choose that moment to decide to come out as queer. It really comes across as kind of opportunistic. It comes across as, you know, kind of playing a card in a sense, and a really non-specific one as well. She makes a comment as well about how she didn't come from a family with anyone openly out, and that also strikes me as odd because most of us didn't. Gay and lesbian and bisexual people are a minority. Most people are heterosexual, so most people are not going to have family members who are openly out. I was fortunate enough to actually have family members who are openly out, but that's not the case for everyone or even most people either. So that's not really unique to Jameela. When she talks about it being scary as an actor to openly admit your sexuality, especially when you're already a brown female in your 30s, and that this is not how she wanted to come out. Okay, fair enough. Except she then goes on to say that she has privilege and power and a large following to bring to the show, which it just seems kind of odd to kind of plead marginalization and then almost in the next sentence be leveraging privilege and power as one of the reasons why your participation in something should be acceptable. I feel like that's a really, really tone deaf thing to be saying. That one of the reasons why I should be able to do this thing, one of the reasons why I should have this job is because of the privilege and power I have. I don't think I really need to analyze that too much to highlight how tone deaf and odd that is. And when she says that sometimes it takes those with more power to help a show get off the ground so we can elevate marginalized stars, I can't speak for communities that I'm not a part of. But if I think about myself being female, I have some experience with a similar attitude from men, kind of leveraging privilege and power as a reason why it would be the best decision to include them in something, as if it's something that we can't do ourselves without them. It's paternalistic, and again, I feel like it's quite tone deaf. I also, this thing about to the press, I really, really don't want to talk about it. I mean, you are. You are talking about it. You've issued a statement about it with comparatively little pressure, in fact. But at the same time, she's also kind of not talking about it, because this is where my main problem with this lies, is with coming out as queer. Coming out as queer is not a very meaningful thing to be doing. So Jameela Jamil has been in a relationship with James Blake since 2015, last I checked. So she's in a heterosexual relationship. It's evidently a long-term heterosexual relationship. She's only been publicly known to be in heterosexual relationships. So you would ask, in what capacity is she queer? Well, the word queer today can refer to a number of different things. And Jameela, in particular, the acronym that she uses includes the Q. Now, the Q generally serves as a catch-all term for different varieties of heterosexuals, which is obviously not something that I'm too stoked about, because I don't see what heterosexuals who are a little bit different from other heterosexuals have to do with the issues that same-sex attracted people deal with. Because she's in a heterosexual relationship, it's entirely possible that she is bisexual. But she hasn't come out as bisexual. And that means that she is either one of these varieties of heterosexuals who perhaps is a bit kinky, or maybe isn't that interested in sex, or only wants to have sex with people that they know really, really well. Those are some of the different things that come under the umbrella term queer today. So if that's the case, then I absolutely will dismiss this, because that's ridiculous. That's heterosexuality. There is nothing queer about it. It's very inappropriate for a heterosexual person to be labeling themselves queer, or even throwing that word around, because it historically has been used as a slur, and it still is today. The alternative is that she is in fact bisexual, which, like I said, is very, very possible. And her being in a heterosexual relationship would be consistent with that, because if you were not attracted to the opposite sex, you wouldn't be bisexual, you would be homosexual. So that's very much part of bisexuality. But this is where I start to feel somewhat insulted, because I think this is probably the most likely scenario. I think Jameela probably is bisexual. I'm not too interested in trying to divine exactly what Jameela's sexuality is, but if she is bisexual, then coming out as bisexual is the thing to do, not coming out as queer. Because when you come out as queer instead of bisexual, what you are doing is coming out right up to, just barely up to the point where you are able to get the required clout to be able to lane gays and lesbians and bisexual people, without actually having to publicly own being a same-sex attracted person and having to explicitly make yourself a target of homophobia. And I find that really, really gross. I really do. Because even if you are a bisexual person who's in a heterosexual relationship, or who is in a long-term heterosexual relationship, there are still benefits for other same-sex attracted people in being open about your bisexuality. When you are open about being same-sex attracted, you help to normalize it, and that makes life easier ultimately for young same-sex attracted people. Gay, lesbian, and bisexual youth benefit from seeing gay, lesbian, and bisexual adults that they can grow up to be. It helps them feel like they are normal, to feel like they're okay, and to feel like they're supported and accepted. The way that Jameela has done this benefits nobody except for Jameela. This is an in my opinion, this is a really manipulative and self-interested thing that she's doing here. If she is in fact bisexual, she's not saying it. Like I said, coming out as queer pretty much means using a magic word to give you the authority to be able to lane the people who are criticizing you without actually having to explicitly paint a target on yourself, which is what we do when we come out as same-sex attracted to an extent. And I find it really gross. It's also led to this whole thing's led to some anger on Twitter as well, and there's a lot of discourse among bisexuals happening at the moment, and I'm quite frustrated. There are internal politics among bisexuals, and that is generally centered around this very issue of bisexual erasure, when we're talking about bisexual people who are in heterosexual relationships, or bisexual people who pretty much only ever have heterosexual relationships. So obviously, quite rightly, in my opinion, there have been people tweeting about the fact that Jameela's in a heterosexual relationship. She is indistinguishable from a heterosexual person. So when she says that she's queer, what exactly does that mean? And it's not because people don't think that you can be quote unquote queer if you're in a heterosexual relationship. People know that bisexuality is a thing, and people know that heterosexual relationships are a normal thing for bisexual people to have, because that's part of the definition of bisexuality. The reason why people are raising this is pretty much for everything that I just said. Because people can see what she's doing here, and it really doesn't look good. She is leveraging her potential to possibly have homosexual relationships in order to get people who actually do have homosexual relationships to get off her back. And it's really obvious to a lot of people, but there has been anger from some bisexual people who consider this to be bisexual erasure. They find it offensive and insulting that people would suggest that just because she's in a heterosexual relationship, Jameela Jamil can't be quote unquote queer. But I feel like these people are missing the point. And personally, I think that if being assumed to be heterosexual until you actually say otherwise is, you know, a really big problem, then you've got it pretty good. It's pretty reasonable to see a person who is in heterosexual relationships and has only, to your knowledge, been in heterosexual relationships. You have no knowledge of them being same-sex attracted. It's pretty reasonable to assume that they're straight, and I don't consider that to be bisexual erasure or biphobia or bisexual discrimination or anything like that. It's pretty rational, because the majority of people in heterosexual relationships are in fact heterosexual, and we benefit from this. We are able to have relationships that are fulfilling and that are natural for us, which are not criminalized in certain parts of the world, which do not get us correctively raped, which do not get us discriminated against. That's one of the things that we're able to do as bisexuals. And I know this because I am a bisexual. I'm in a long-term heterosexual relationship, and I've been in homosexual relationships. And the difference is pretty damn obvious to me. The lived experience is very different. The difference between walking down the street holding my girlfriend's hand and walking down the street and holding my boyfriend's hand, worlds apart. And I find the suggestion that not having a target painted on your back for violent homophobia, that in and of itself is somehow systemic oppression, I find that idea really, really quite perverse. And this sort of thing is part of the reason why there can be real conflict between gays and lesbians and bisexual people. And it's typically bisexual people who have a lot of heterosexual relationships. And it's understandable as well, because getting upset that you're not seen as being, that you're not seen as oppressed, or that you're not oppressed in the right way, really is a slap in the face for people who don't have that option of having relationships that are natural for them and are not targeted by homophobia. And I can understand that frustration to some extent. And what Jameela Jamil is doing right now, unfortunately, is stirring that stuff up. And that's another reason why I'm pretty grossed out by what she's doing here. There is some commentary to be made on the subject of race in this. I don't think that I'm a person who can explain that very well. There is a lot of talk on Twitter about it. So, you know, if you want to go check out Twitter, you can find a lot of really good analysis from different black Twitter users who've talked about the fact that, you know, no matter how queer Jameela is, she still has no connection to ball culture. And there are politics there. So that's something else to consider as well. I think that Jameela Jamil has really made a misstep here, and I think that she has leveraged that privilege and power and almost weaponized it in a way. And I think that she has thrown a bunch of different people under the bus. And I think that she is normalizing an attitude towards identity politics that is ultimately really, really toxic. And I'm not looking forward to the backlash against bisexuals because of the frankly self-absorbed hit dog sort of behavior that's happening on Twitter at the moment. So we will see how this unfolds. And I know Jameela said she was going to be taking a break for a while, and I really hope that she actually does. I think that she really needs to take a step back and kind of listen to what people are saying, get a little bit of perspective here. And I also hope that she takes care of herself, because getting criticized by hundreds of people on social media is not a pleasant experience for anyone, whether they are in the wrong or not. So, yeah, that's it for me. Like and subscribe, and we should be back soon with another episode. Catch you next time.